Today on CityCast Philly, the city has sued an employer for not paying its workers. This is the first time Philly has enforced its wage theft laws through a legal action. But will it be its last? It's Wednesday, April 12th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Juliana Reyes, you're an investigative reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. So this is kind of wild to me. You work a job, you don't get paid. Where's the first place you go to get help, to get your money?
Yeah, well, wage theft is actually a really widespread issue in Philadelphia and all over the country. There was a report that Temple's Scheller Center for Social Justice put out in 2015, and they estimated that in any given week, 130,000 Philadelphia workers are experiencing wage theft. So exactly what you said.
What? So they're not getting a paycheck?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said about like you're doing the work. You've agreed with your boss that you're going to get paid and you just don't get paid. And that could mean tips. It could mean your tips are being stolen by your boss. It could also just mean that there was a day rate that you were going to get paid for construction work and you just didn't get paid. And so, the city, you can go to the city. You can go to the city's Department of Labor. They have an Office of Worker Protections, and there is a city law saying that wage theft is illegal, and you can file a complaint with them and they'll investigate it.
Interesting. So you actually reported on a case that made waves in the city last week. What happened?
Yeah, so the city has been investigating different employers for breaking the wage theft law. And oftentimes when they find out that an employer has broken the law, they will send a notice of violation to that employer and the employer will comply with the city's orders. And so the city will say, you need to make your worker whole. You stole $1,000, you need to pay them. And most times the employer will do that. But in the times that the employer doesn't do that, the city has had to figure out other things to do to basically force an employer who doesn't want to comply into complying.
And that's like what? Giving them fines? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So one thing they started doing in early 2020 was putting together a list of bad actors. Mm-hmm. And that was supposed to shame these employers into complying.
Juliana, how bad of an employer do you have to be to get on this list?
So the city puts you on the bad actors list if you are a repeat offender. It also puts you on that list if you refuse to respond to their orders. So if you're like, I'm going to pay, and then you never send proof of paying, you'll get put on that list. So it's basically what they call like willful flouting of the law.
Interesting. So there's actually a collection of these so-called bad actors. We actually will have that link in our show notes. So they're forced to pay these fines, and that adds up, right?
Well, actually, the city hasn't been levying fines and penalties on these employers. It hasn't done that yet. That's something they're hoping to do in the future as a way to force employers into complying. But so far, they have not done that. And I've reported on this for a few years that this office has been lax when it comes to certain kinds of enforcement. So basically, and if an employer isn't complying with the city's orders, there isn't that much that they have done so far. But that's why this story was a big deal. They took this employer to court, and that was the first time they had done that in 7 years.
Juliana, what do employers say about all of this?
Yeah, so the city's Office of Worker Protections enforces 7 labor laws. They enforce the wage theft law. They also enforce the Fair Workweek law, which is a law that mandates consistent schedules for retail and fast food and hotel workers. And so there's a whole slate of these worker protection laws. And generally, employers and the Chamber of Commerce, which represents employers, have said that they feel like the city is overreaching and that the city should not be getting involved in how a business is run.
Have we always had these laws in the city?
The wage theft law began to be enforced in 2016, and the Fair Workweek law is newer. That one began to be enforced in 2020. And there's other laws like paid sick leave, which have been around for a while, but they're not like, it hasn't been like from the beginning of time. They're newer legislation, like in the last 5 to 10 years.
Are we going to see more of these types of cases pop up? Are there groups, organizations, or individuals pushing the city to enforce this law?
The hope is that we will see more of these cases, because just because they're not being reported to the city doesn't mean they're not happening. So that there's a big gap in awareness. So there's like these 7 worker protection laws: paid sick leave, fair work week, wage theft, but a lot of workers don't know their rights, don't know that they have the right to a consistent schedule or that they have a right to paid sick leave. And so there's been a push for greater awareness, and the office is doing outreach and often works with worker organizations like One Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Domestic Workers Alliance, and also worker attorneys like Community Legal Services. And so these are all organizations that are on the ground, like doing this work with workers and building relationships with them, because oftentimes workers are concerned about reaching out to the government. They're afraid of like the ramifications, like what might happen if they speak to like a governmental body.
And going back to the lawsuit, what does this lawsuit mean for worker protections in Philly?
The lawsuit represents an escalation of the city's enforcement tactics. So, as I've said before, in the past, there has been a lack of action on the city's part when it comes to going hard against employers that break this law. And I've talked to enforcement experts, and they say that strong action often deters other employers from breaking the law, because they see that the city is actually not going to let employers get away with this.
All right, that's Juliana Reyes, investigative reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you so much for being here on CityCast Philly.
Thank you.
We'll have a link to Juliana's full story in our show notes. And here's what else Philly's talking about. Parks on Tap, the free traveling beer garden, opens today from 4 to 10 p.m. through Sunday at the Azalea Garden, located along Kelly Drive. The beer garden will be at Columbus Square next week. Make sure you sign in before you go at parksontap.com. And the first Africatown Restaurant Week is underway in Southwest. You can enjoy African, Caribbean, and even some Italian cuisines on Woodland Avenue. Orders of $20 or more can get 15% off. Check out philaafricatown.org. It's time for the tip of the day, where we share a life hack for living in Philly. If you believe you experience wage theft, you can file a complaint through the Office of Worker Protections. According to the city, your complaint has to be filed within 3 years of not getting paid, and the total amount of money lost has to be more than $100 and less than $10,000. We'll have the link to the forms you need to fill out in our show notes. If you have a tip of the day, we'd love to hear from you too. Call or text us at 215-259-8170. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode, tell your coworker, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter too. It's called Hey Philly. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.